Today I'll be showing you how I painted this wolf in acrylics. Hi there, my name is Michelle Cashmore and today's video is the second part of a two-part demonstration on painting this wolf. The first part covered airbrushing the background using an airbrush and acrylic inks, and I'll put a link to the video for that up above. Today I'm going to cover the painting of the actual wolf itself. So I used Liquitex Basics for the most part for my acrylic paints, and I'm working on a 40cm by 50cm canvas. My reference photo for this came from Wildlife Reference Photos, so if you'd like to paint this same wolf then you can head on there to buy the photo for yourself. Now let's get on to the demonstration itself. To begin with, I blocked in the area of the wolf in a tan colour and then transferred my details on top of it using white transfer paper. As usual, I've started with one of the eyes, and I'm just blocking in areas of colour and then starting to add details over the top of it. This particular wolf has a lot of variation within her coat. You can see here that I'm using whites, greys, browns, yellows and all sorts of colours within that range. Even though she's a grey wolf, she's actually mostly brown in colour. I'm just carefully observing my reference photo and blocking in these colours where I see them. As I move on to this eye, notice how much darker I'm making it. That's because this side of her face is in shadow. While in real life her eyes would be the same colour, on the painting this eye is much darker because of this. Fur around her eye is much darker for this reason as well. I'm using far more dark browns and greys and almost no creams. I'm using a liner brush to add the fur details. I'm not looking to paint in every single hair here. I'm mostly working in clumps of fur and just making sure that it's not too uniform looking. One thing to pay close attention to is how long the fur is that you're painting. If you look at the length of the fur on the bridge of her nose and compare it to the length of the fur on her cheeks, you'll notice that the fur on her nose is much shorter, and it's important to get that right in order to look realistic. I'm paying close attention to where the light and shadows fall, as these are what define the structure of her face. If you get these wrong, then your subject won't look anatomically correct. So here I'm just adding some details to her nose, making sure I get the light and texture correct. Her nose was one of these areas that looked a little unusual on the reference photo. So here I was careful to make sure to observe the shapes that I saw, just to make sure that I got it all correct. So here I'm just adding in the very short muzzle fur. There will be whiskers that go over this later, but I will add them in towards the end. Right now I'm just focusing on getting the main body of fur completed, and we'll add small details later on. Painting fur, and feathers as well, is definitely a layering process. It's a matter of building up layers and layers of details to make the fur look thick and realistic and like there's a lot of hair there. Unfortunately there's no quick fix for painting fur. There's no brush that will just do it all in one go. It's just a time consuming layering process. Because I tend to work in sections, you can actually see the difference between the layers from the initial block-in of colours through building up details and then comparing it to the more final detailed sections next to it. Acrylics are a very forgiving medium in that it's really easy to work lights over dark colours. So I use this to my advantage when background colours are dark. So if there are fine light details, then I will just paint in that background the dark colour and then come back over later with my details. It's a very easy way to work and very forgiving, as if you make a mistake it's really easy to just paint over and fix it. Moving on to the ears, there's a lot of very rich warm tones of brown here, and also a lot of variation in the length of hair. So on the outside of her ears, the length of her fur is quite short, but she has these really long white hairs inside her ear. And I'm just making sure to observe where the fur is short and where it's long, and how it lies as well, because there's a lot of changes of direction of fur here as well. As before, just building up my layers, making sure that the fur is not too uniform, that there's slight changes in direction, just to make it look a bit more natural, as if the hair all runs completely parallel to each other then it doesn't look realistic at all. And here I'm just continuing to build up all those little details and all those layers on the ear. Apologies for the shake on some sections of this video. Because I'm working on a stretched canvas, the canvas moves slightly when I'm leaning on it here, and that's causing the shake you see here. So sorry about that. You'll see me go back at various points through this video to tweak sections that are already largely done. So even though I get a section to completion, or as near completion as I think, it doesn't stop me from going back and revisiting and tweaking areas that I realise need it after I've completed another section. Don't be afraid to go back and readjust areas later if you think they need them. I do this quite often to make sure that everything stays tied together. One thing that I discovered during painting the details of the wolf was that the airbrush background that I painted during the last video turned out to be quite prone to scratching. So I would recommend applying a layer of acrylic medium over the top of your airbrush sections, and that way that will help protect it. It's certainly what I will be doing for any airbrush portions of my paintings from now on. After finishing this piece, I varnished it so it's all completely protected now, but in future I think that layer of medium while working on it would give that protection while it was in progress, but still allow you to paint over it and work with it. So here I'm moving on to the fur of her body, which is much longer, has a lot of variation in it, a lot of stray hairs, a lot of fur going in various different directions. So I'm not trying to copy everything completely exact from the reference photo, as I would be here for years if that was the case. However, I'm going for close enough. I want it to look realistic, but I don't want to be here forever while doing so. So again, I'm taking advantage of the ability of acrylics to be able to paint light over dark very easily here. So that means that I can paint in my base colour very dark and add in all those stray lighter hairs over the top. A lot of her body is in shadow, so I'm making sure to get those areas dark enough. However, particularly towards her left side, there are some much brighter areas. So when I'm blocking in those colours, I'm just making sure to observe my reference photo and just get those areas correct. So now it's just a case of repeating the same process through the rest of the body. As I've mentioned before, I like to work in sections at a time. However, there are other artists who prefer to work across the whole painting, so they will do one layer across the entire painting and then go back and add a refining layer, and so on. Whichever way you prefer to work is absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong way, just whatever way you prefer to work. I'd always recommend trying out multiple methods and finding the one that works best for you. Everybody will have a slightly different way of working. I'm just showing you the methods that work best for me personally. So the lighter patch of fur on the left hand side is one example of an area that I did go back and adjust later on. As I continued to work through the painting, it became clear that that section was too pale and not saturated enough in colour. So what I did there was I glazed over some more colour with it, and that tied it closer to the more orangey reddish tones of the fur next to it and made it look a lot better overall. Now we're on to the home stretch with the last section of body. You can see here how the layers are refining from very broad base colours, which really just map out the very large areas of light and shadow, through steadily more detailed layers of fur until I get to the level of detail that I'm looking for. And here I'm just making sure I tie together the section that I'm currently working on with one that I more or less completed earlier. So I'm just making sure that the colours all blend in together, that the length of the fur, that there's no harsh stop-start lines, and just reworking the bound, like the edge between the two of them. Of course, if you do work across the whole painting at once, then you don't need to worry about making sure that different sections of the painting tie together. But I find it very difficult personally to do that. I like to alternate between broader areas and more detailed areas, so I just take the time to make sure that my painting ties together as a whole. And then there's just the final details at the end, and then we're done. And that is it for this video. I do hope you've enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you'd like to see more of my work or be kept up to date, then please do subscribe. You can also find me at my website, michellcashmoreart.com, on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you're interested in prints of my work, then you can also find those at fineartamerica.com. I hope to see you again soon.